Both. As I said, the FBI portion was closed. The White House Personnel Security Office, who is the one that makes a recommendation for adjudication, had not finished their process and therefore not made a recommendation to the White House.
It's been a full week since the White House held a press briefing and struggled to explain how alleged domestic abuser Rob Porter, who didn't pass the FBI's background check because his ex-wives told the FBI of his alleged abuse, how that man stayed as White House staff secretary with access to the president and some of the most sensitive information in the country. Now, the White House canceled press briefings last week because of the Parkland mass murder, but one unnamed administration official reportedly called that a, quote, reprieve. Now, today, Sarah Huckabee Sanders was back at the podium for a scant 20 minutes. She did not get any questions about Porter, so we still don't know why the security process failed so badly in that case, or why Sanders and Kelly and others lied in a sort of egregious and obvious way about the timeline of what happened. But Sanders did get a question about one of the most senior White House aides operating without permanent security clearance. That, of course, Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law. Sources telling the Washington Post he has had access to classified material and that staff on the National Security Council, he issues more requests for information to the intelligence community than any White House employee. Today, Sarah Huckabee Sanders was asked whether Kushner still has access to classified material, despite the new memo from the chief of staff barring certain people with outstanding security issues from having access to top secret information.
No decision within the memo will impact anything that Jared Kushner is working on in terms of specifics on security clearance. I can't get into.
Does he not need classified information to do his job?
I can't answer whether someone has security clearance or not, as we've addressed many times before, but I can tell you that nothing that has taken place will affect the valuable work that Jared is doing. He continues and will continue to be a valued member of the team, and he'll continue to do the important work that he's been focused on with the last year.
MSNBC political analyst Carol Leanig is a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter of the Washington Post, where she's written about the administration's security process. Let's start with that claim. The claim is there's a new memo out from Chief of Staff John Kelly that's going to not allow people on these sort of temporary security clearances access to classified information. She says nothing's going to change. And I want to read you something that Dan Pfeiffer, who worked in the Obama White House, said. He said, Kushner and I had the same title. He sits in my old office. There are only three options. Sanders is lying, Kelly is lying, and Kushner is keeping his interim clearance. Kushner's new portfolio includes staring at the wall from 9 to 5. What do you think of that?
Well, it sounds pretty clever. I would say that it's sort of, right now, Sarah Sanders' comments are not dishonest, they are graceful. She's allowing the opportunity, it seems to me, for the process to work out, for either the clearance to mysteriously be approved, which does not seem likely, or for Jared Kushner to decide to bow out. And we'll see what happens.
Wait, you think? Well, wait a second. You think the latter is a possibility?
If you don't have a clearance and you don't have access to top information, how could you exactly broker Middle East peace? How could you learn anything about the intelligence that's behind what's going on in the Middle East? How could you meet on a regular basis with top foreign diplomats? It's an open question. There could be a downgrade of his clearance potentially, but keep in mind, my colleagues and I reported about, I can't remember, it may be a week ago, it may be 10 days ago, we reported that Jared Kushner is one of the people who's reading the Presidential Daily Brief, getting a briefing on the crown jewels of America's intelligence operation. So this is very serious stuff. Who is giving us intel in foreign governments? Where are our operatives overseas? What terror cells have we identified and where are their hideouts? These are really very, very sensitive matters. And if you don't have a clearance, according to Chief of Staff Kelly's memo and directive, if you don't have a top secret clearance, you shouldn't be reading that brief. You may be able to read a sort of elementary school version of it, but not the current one.
Just to be clear here, before this Kelly memo, which is a little barn door closing after the horse is out, there's all sorts of reporting, 47 people without permanent security clearances directly to the president. That's NBC's reporting. 34 started in January 20th, 2017, so this isn't a time issue. You got 10 members of the National Security Council. You got Kushner and Ivanka. Don McGahn had an interim security clearance back in November. On the case of Jared, it seems to me here, there's a very strong circumstantial case, it's not definitive, that something's come up in his background check that just makes it not possible for him to get a permanent security clearance, right? I mean, isn't that where the breadcrumbs are leading?
We like not to talk about what the circumstantial evidence suggests in the Washington Post, but I will say that it sort of strains ability to think that a very, very senior, top White House advisor hasn't been fully checked and reviewed and determined one way or the other whether or not his clearance is possible. It seems like there is an obstacle here that's fairly significant. Whether that can be surmounted or not, we'll see.
And thank you for staying to the hard and definitive proven facts while I speculate. But just to be clear here, just because the context of this is hard, it's an opaque process. It's happening behind closed doors. People aren't familiar with it. The reason I ask that is simply because in the Rob Porter case, now we know that this very extended period of interim clearance, which was weird and bizarre as well, was almost certainly because things had been flagged that had people worried, right? That's kind of what we know about Porter.
And keep in mind, too, Chris, you're asking all the right questions, but keep in mind that this is a particularly bizarre scenario. You have an ongoing investigation, criminal and counterintelligence investigation of many senior people in the Trump White House because they were in fact, in the Trump campaign while Russia was meddling with our election. So while that investigation that's extremely sensitive is going on, you also have security clearance investigations. While you also have that going on, you have a senior advisor to the president, a son-in-law in a job position who has had to amend his own,
Filing.
materials, his own filings, I think 4 times now. That has